Coming to you live from the Nasdaq market site in Times Square. Welcome to the February 23rd special edition of Advisory Live. We're powered by Nasdaq IR Insight, and I'm your host, Will Briganti. Joining me today from Nasdaq's London office is Maria Plunkett. Maria is a director at Nasdaq Advisory Services, and it specializes in the EMEA region. Maria, thank you so much for joining us today from London.
Hi, Will. Thank you for having me.
All right, so today we want to talk about South Africa. So give us a quick breakdown on what happened in the South African market last week.
Sure. So last Wednesday, the 14th of February, after considerable pressure from its own party, ANC, South African President Jacob Zuma resigned, and he's been in power since May 2009. So he gave way to the more business-friendly President Cyril Ramaphosa. And investors can now expect investigations into all implicated officials, including the outgoing President Jacob Zuma, and the return of credibility to South African institutions. The move has actually led to comparison to Brazil, which delivered 70% returns in 2016 after a change of leadership.
So how did the local market react?
So the broader local FTSE JSE All-Share Index has been very volatile overall since the start of the year. And last Wednesday, on the day of the announcement, it was up 3.7%. And it was its best daily performance over the last 12 months. Over the last week, the index gained 2.5% overall. Currency-wise, the South African rand lost 1.7% against dollar. And to put it in a bit more context, overall, the rand lost 10.7% against the dollar over the last 12 months. And over the past few years, its value nearly halved. So currency continued to underperform throughout the whole week and lost 2% by the end of the week. The good news gave the initial boost to the markets, but there still remains some skepticism towards future developments and possible positive catalysts, cabinet reshuffle, budget commitments to tighter fiscal discipline, reaction by rating agencies. But restoration and confidence might be a positive catalyst in itself.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Terrific insight. So my next question for you is, how has the South African market then performed versus other emerging markets?
Yes, so looking over the past 12 months, the FTSE JSE All-Share Index gained 12.4%. However, in dollar terms, it was actually pretty much flat.
Right.
This compares to a jump of 27.9% for MSCI emerging markets. So clearly, South Africa has been underperforming emerging markets overall.
Sure, and did you and the team observe any specific changes worth mentioning in terms of, for example, local foreign ownership across the Nasdaq South African client base? That's my final question, by the way.
So looking at key movements across the Nasdaq South African client base, we observed domestic institutions being among the largest buyers, accounting for about 70% of the overall buying activity. And that was driven by some of the more well-known South African names, Coronation Fund Managers, Momentum Asset Management, Sanlam Investment Management. British firms were also among buyers, but to a lesser extent. And in contrast, the selling activity was led by US and European investors. In fact, based on our sample, US firms reduced their exposure to South African equity by 20% over the last 6 months.
Terrific insight, Maria. I really appreciate you breaking that down for us. Obviously, a lot of activity happening from a geopolitical perspective in South Africa. Terrific insight. I want to thank you very much for joining me on today's program, live from Nasdaq's London office. Terrific insight. Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah, we look forward to having you back. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. This was Maria Plunkett. She's a director at Nasdaq Advisory Services in our London office covering the EMEA region. Thank you so much for joining us and have a terrific weekend.